Hello and welcome to our SEC Game of the Week preview. It is the Alabama Crimson Tide versus the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm your producer, Jeremiah Long, and joining me is the host with the most, the football encyclopedia himself, a man who can tell you what color shirt he was wearing on what day of the week in 1972 when and I'm not joking there, he can tell you these things. Mr. Football himself, Vincent Turner. How's it going, Vincent?
Hey, Jeremiah, man, you so kind this morning. I couldn't, excuse me, there's somebody trying to call me get in. But you're so kind this morning, man, and God bless. And it's football time in the state of Georgia.
Absolutely. So you're going to be bringing us a preview of the Alabama Crimson Tide versus the Georgia Bulldogs. We are 100 Yards of Football, Sports Talk Radio. Real quick, I just want to highlight something else we've got going on. We've got our podcast. And if you haven't seen our podcast yet, then you're going to want to definitely check that out. We are broadcasting live over on Spotify with our podcast. And if you go over to Spotify and just type in 100 Yards of Football, then you'll get us. And if you also check out on Apple Podcast, you can see our podcast there, 100 Yards of Football. Each week, we're bringing you game previews, we're bringing you Legends interviews, we're bringing you player prospects, and we're bringing you some of the most amazing sports commentary you've ever heard. Another thing that we always do is we keep it on the field. It's very important with our group and with what we do that we talk about sports and we talk about stats. We're not super worried about what's happening off the field with these players. We're worried about how, if they're catching balls, whether they're blocking, whether they're getting the right punts, whether they're scoring, whether they're winning the games or losing the games. Those are the things we stay concerned with here at 100 Yards of Football. So without further ado, Vincent Turner, please bring us the SEC preview game, the Georgia Bulldogs versus the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Well, Jeremiah, I want to say first and foremost, thank you for all the kind words that you just said about me today. But I'm going to get right into it. This is what the South is all about. When everybody says the SEC has the best football in all of America, it's the reason why. Because the number 2 team, the Alabama Crimson Tide, is going to play the number 3 team, the Georgia Bulldogs, Saturday night on national TV, CBS. It's no other game that's got any magnitude. And right now, I'm so proud and blessed to be here in Atlanta metro area, to be around the excitement and just the number of this big football game. I'm going to take you back down to the history timeline. I'm going to start with the University of Georgia. Think about 1975 when Georgia had that great defense called the Junkyard Dogs. And there was a young man from Augusta, Georgia that cut a song called the Dooley's Junkyard Dogs. And you know what he said about it? He said the Junkyard Dogs will hit you. They'll knock you. They'll haul you off and they'll sock you. Well, the Dooley's Junkyard Dogs 2020 version of their defense is going to go down to Tuscaloosa and play the University of Alabama. And you think about this, when you think about Alabama and all their national championships around Bear Bryant, you always think about that song, Sweet Home Alabama. Big wheels keep on turning. Coming home to singing songs about my Southland. And the University of Alabama is going to be waiting for the Dooley's Junkyard Dogs of the 2020 version. And think about this. What's so exciting? Think about the traditions of both schools. Think about all the great players. I'm going to start with Georgia. Charlie Tripley, Frank Sinkwich, Pat Dye Sr., the great late Pat Dye, Fran Tarkenton, Bill Stanfield, Jake Scott, and, of course, that magical 80s season. Those players is on that national championship team that put Georgia on the national map. The young man that had a picture on Sports Illustrated in November from Riceville, Georgia, by the name of Herschel Walker. The quarterback, the renowned Buck Bellew from Valdosta.
Yes,
Leslie Scott. Then think about this, all the other great players that's played at Georgia. Running back Tim Worley, Garrison Hurst, Nick Chubb. And they're going down and play the great tradition of Alabama. And think about this, when you think about Alabama football, you go all the way back to Johnny Mack Brown. You can't feel me. Dixie Howe, Don Hudson, Leroy Jordan, Box Starr, the young man that came on campus in the 60s that everybody know in New York was one of the most flamboyant athletes of all time. Out of Beaver Falls, Joe Namath, Pat Tramble, Ken the Snake Stabler. Johnny Musso, woo-wee, one of the best pass rushers all time from the 305 Miami, Derek Thomas. And that tradition is going to come together Saturday night down in Tuscaloosa. But before the game on Saturday night, I'm going to take you back down to another history timeline. Think about the 76 season when the Junkyard Dogs defense was born then. You had Alabama coming to Athens ranked number 10. You had Georgia number 6. Clearly, they were the best teams that season. And Georgia won that football game with some outstanding defense. And Matt Robertson, local guy at North Springs High School, led them to a 21-0 victory. But that's when the Junkyard Dogs, invented by Vince Dooley, emerged that season. That defense led by Bill Krug, Lawrence Kraft, oh my God, Dickie Clark, Ronnie Swoops, Jeff Lewis, Jim Griffin, Ben Zambezi. Woo-wee. Bill Krug and Mark Mitchell, And they beat the Alabama team 21-0 in the history tidbit. That was the only team Bear Bryant coached in the SEC that he was only shut out. Now let's roll the dice 44 years later. It's the Junkyard Dogs 2020 version going down to Tuscaloosa and playing the number 1 offense in the country. Now I'm going to start off where I think Georgia's going to have to win the football game on Saturday. I'm going to start with the offense. The young man from the 9-1-2, Stetson Bennett, the 5th, has played outstanding this year. 689 yards, 5 touchdowns. But the key in the football game to him, starting with him, he's got to go back and look at that game frame from last year and see how my man Joe Burrow kind of conquered that Alabama defense. And the biggest key in that game last year, what Joe Burrow did with LSU, he had 64 yards on the ground. So to me, that means Mr. Bennett has to make some plays with his feet on Saturday night against Alabama. The running game has got to be better. Zamir White, this is your chance on the national stage. My brother, you got to get more than 55 yards against Alabama. This is your time to be enthroned in the history of that great running back tradition at the University of Georgia. Rodney Hampton, Tim Worley, Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, Todd Gurley, and of course the young man out of Ricefield, Georgia, my man, Mr. Herschel Walker. Then on the outside, a very key part of the football game offensive for Georgia, in my opinion, Karius Jackson out of Fort Valley, man, you've been special as the number 2 receiver. 91 yards against Tennessee last week. 1 touchdown. You got to be huge on Saturday night against the University of Alabama, because we know George Pickens is going to get a lot of coverage. And the young man out of California, Jermaine Burton, you got to be huge. And kudos to Todd Monken. He has been outstanding as the OC the last 2 weeks for the University of Georgia. Now let me talk about the Georgia's defense. Y'all surprised me on Saturday. Y'all held a very good Tennessee football team to 1 yard rushing. And in my greatest memory, in my mind, I did not think that could happen. Simply because Tennessee had 2 NFL prospects on their offensive line, and Cade Mays and Trey Smith. But kudos to Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, Malik Herring, Nakobe Dean, and Monty Rice. Y'all did y'all thing on Saturday. And when you think about this Georgia defense in the secondary with players like Tyson Campbell, Eric Stokes, Richard LeCount, it takes me back to a couple of great defenses that's been in the history of college football. Let me take you back to the University of Washington. Georgia reminds me of that great defense that won the national championship in '91. They had Steve Edmond, DeMarco Farr, Jamie Bailey, Dana Hall. Can you feel me? Another great defense with the Miami Hurricanes, that 2001 squad. They had Ed Reed, Mike Rump, Philip Buchanan, DJ Williams, Jonathan Vilma, all of them went in the first round. In that 1979 Alabama defense, they had E.J. Jr., Brian Braggs, Wayne Hamilton, Don McNeil. This defense right here is good as all those defenses I just mentioned. So for the Georgia defense, the very key is, can you get pressure on a red-hot Alabama offense with a red-hot quarterback in Mac Jones? You're going to have to put pressure on them. That's all right. That Georgia D-line and them guys coming off the edge, Mr. Adam Anderson, and the young man out of Marietta, Alarier. I'm trying to pronounce his name right, but forgive me if I don't. But you know who I'm talking about. The young man has been the best defensive lineman this year on the national scale. 2 sacks last week and 2 tackles for losses against the University of Tennessee. And that Georgia D-line got 10 sacks on the season. But if you can't get a pass rush, the biggest key to me in the football game for Georgia from a defensive standpoint is on the outside, on the perimeter, where money can be made on Saturday night. Tyson Campbell, Eric Stokes, DJ Daniel, Richard LeCount, Lewis Klein, this is your time to earn money on Saturday night because you're going against, I'm going to say, NFL-type talent at the receiver position. Devontae Smith, 316 yards. The young man out of Texas, Jayden Waddle, 398 yards. And John Michie, the Canada, he's got 298 yards. Georgians have to go and be able to cover on Saturday night. That's going to be a must. You're going to have to make some plays back there in the secondary. And if you do that, then I'm going to tell you, when all these NFL draft boards come out, the 2021s, Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes, your name might be ahead of that board because Saturday night is for you to make some money because you're going to go against the best of the best. Now, for the University of Alabama, for you to win the game on Saturday night, I'm going to be honest with you. I thought Mac Jones wasn't that guy. But I'm going to be honest with you. He like Tua number 2. 1,101 yards through 3 games, baby. 8 touchdowns, 1 INT, and he's been on fire. We know the Alabama offense. We know what they got on the outside. Devontae Smith, hands down, the best wide receiver in the country. Jayden Waddle, he can get deep on you. But the key to Alabama this year, the young man out of San Francisco, Najee Harris, is trying to win the Heisman, people. 349 yards in 3 games. 5 touchdowns against Ole Miss last week. 200 yards rushing. Somebody say he's the second coming to Adrian Peterson, baby. And he's trying to take home that trophy, the Heisman. Now, Alabama defensively. I don't know what's happened. Y'all gave up 647 yards against Ole Miss. Y'all coming up against a team that's got a better offensive line than Ole Miss. And the thing that was alarming to me, Ole Miss had 2 running backs, Mr. Connor and Mr. Ely, that went over 100 yards. And they were gashing that Alabama D-line. So, that being said, your 2 best players on the defense is Dalen Moses and Christian Harris. Some way, somehow, if Alabama is going to be the Alabama defensively on Saturday night, y'all have to stop the run. Hands down. And last week, Matt Corral threw for 349 yards on your secondary that's got an NFL prospect in Practice Santan. It seemed like to me y'all going to have problems back there for the season. But on Saturday night, if Alabama's going to play at a high level and really take it to the next level, defensively, you got to be able to stop the run because Georgia is going to be much more successful with Zamir White running the football than Mr. Connor on Saturday night. So that being said, man, you think about this game, number 2 against number 3. I got a lot of Georgia fans, boy, they saying, man, we've been waiting, and this is our time to shine. And we got the number 1 defense in the country that's giving up 12 points. But however, you're going against an offense that's averaging 51 points a game. They got 2 receivers in Mr. Waddle and Mr. Smith that's possibly going to be drafted in the top 15 in the 2021 NFL draft. And they got a running back that's trying to get in the draft up in that upper 10 and Mr. Najee Harris. He's trying to win the Heisman, folks. So, that being said, which defense plays better on Saturday night is going to win the football game. And think about all these great games that Saturday night is going to bring. Must-see TV. I even go back in 1969 when Ole Miss played Alabama, and the great Archie Manning, he became a known figure, had almost 500 yards total offense. I go back to 1973 when LSU played Alabama, number 3 against number 1. And that night, you saw the coming of an Alabama defense led by a former coach, by Mr. Dubose. And now, you got Saturday night, I'm 60 years old. Man. It's going to be Roll Tide. And how about them dogs? Saturday night, CBS. Stars are going to be born. Money is going to be made with the NFL. Scouts are going to be watching across the country. Two great coaches. Nick Saban, the teacher. Kirby Smart, the pupil. Kirby, it's your time to be up in the upper epsilon now, all the great college coaches in America.
Yep.
And I'm going to say this. Kirby Smart has put the University of Georgia on another level. And it's now to show the nation it's them dogs ready to hunt. Like the great James Brown, who put out that song, Dooley's Junkyard Dogs. We're going to hit them. We're going to knock them. We're going to haul them off. We're going to sock them. The dogs of 2020, Dooley. And to the University of Alabama, Nick Saban, every time I hear Alabama, and you know what I'm talking about, Jeremiah, it's always about that song by the great group Leonard Skinner. Sweet home Alabama. Big wheels keep on turning. Carry me home to singing songs about the Southland. We waiting on you dogs Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on CBS.
And this is going to be one for the history books. If everything goes the way that Georgia wants it to go, then I am hoping that it is a nail biter all the way to the end. And for me, and for where my money's at, I'm hoping that Georgia pulls it out in the very end. I just think that it'll make for a more historic game, especially given that you do have Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. This is a true rivalry that could actually bring things into the modern era and make this one of those starting points where you really start thinking about Georgia as a team to beat. They're coming off in the end, an impressive win off of Tennessee, a game that was hard fought. You know, they were down coming into the second half, and they did adjust. So we know that this Georgia team can adjust. We know that when the chips are down, that this team will put hands on balls. They will get the fumbles. They will recover. If there's any fumbles on the Alabama side or any interception opportunities, they're going to take them. And do not underestimate this Georgia team when it comes to that. Alabama is a true powerhouse. They deserve every bit of cred that they get. But when you put two teams like this back to back, man, the sparks will fly, and it's going to be a great day for football. I definitely agree there. So if you're watching 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio, I'm the producer Jeremiah Long. This is our host, Vincent Turner. Every week, we bring you the absolute best in football, whether it's game previews, legends interviews, player prospects. And when we get back into the draft era, we're going to be going back into the draft and telling you about what the best people coming up from high school into college and from college towards the NFL. So you can count on us to come to you live every week for more of that. We broadcast on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every week, which is where you're listening to us now if you're on our podcast. And we're coming to you through the Believe Podcast Network, which we're extremely proud to be a part of. And we've had nothing but great times ever since launching. So make sure that you listen every week to the podcast and let us know if there's anything that you'd like to hear from us from other game previews. So for the whole team here at 100 Yards of Football, I'm Jeremiah Long. This is Vincent Turner. And Vincent Turner, what's your last word?
Hey, man, I'm going to say this. Which defense plays well on Saturday night, makes the plays, turnovers, fumbles, interceptions, is going to win the football game. But you know how we do it at 100 Yards of Football. My final word, Jeremiah. Like the great poet, Marvin Gaye. Yeah. And you know what he says? Let's get it on in Tuscaloosa Saturday night. God bless.